I studied psychopaths for a long time. And you think of psychopaths as selfish, right? Self-centered. But it's weird because psychopaths betray themselves all the time because they don't learn from experience. So they get what they want now, but they fail. And so then I thought, oh, well, psychopaths don't care about other people. They also don't care about their future selves. Then I thought, oh, that's the same thing.
They don't learn from remorse because they don't have remorse.
They don't. Well, they certainly don't have remorse.
The dark triads, or you like to talk about dark tetrads when you bring in sadism, of course.
Yeah.
But the characteristic of people above average in psychopathy is the lack of remorse.
Yeah, well,
and a lack of remorse is an inability to learn.
Yes.
You hurt somebody. You did something wrong. It had consequences. If you don't feel remorse, that remorse is activating the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex of your brain, which is making you feel social pain.
Right.
You don't feel that if you have psychopathic tendencies.
Yes, and then, well, and if that pain doesn't make itself, like, I think that pain is the felt sense of the eradication of a neurological system. So, like, imagine that a system emerges in this Darwinian sense to dominate.
Right.
So now you're under its sway. Okay, now it has a goal in mind, and when it makes itself manifest, it fails. Okay, the consequence of that failure should be the destruction of that system. I think that felt pain is the psychological consequence of the death of a system that failed to meet its goals.
Right.
Now, it's going to struggle and fight to maintain itself, even in the face of failure, right? Which is why it's hard to get rid of a bad habit, for example.
Right.
It's a living thing.
Right,
it's not going to give up without a struggle.
Right.
But the corollary of that would be approximately equivalent to what you just said. There's no learning because there's no remorse, because there's no difference between remorse and learning. The first stage of learning is, oops, I was wrong.
Yeah.
That has to go. That's a sacrificial offering too, right? That part of me has to go.
Right.
And it's going, no, I want to live. And fair enough. And sometimes, like, if you're really poorly oriented in your life and you fail cataclysmically, an awful lot of you has to go. You know, when a dominant...
This gets back to your wife talking about gratitude, by the way. Because the same thing. It's the prefrontal cortex saying, no. You limbic system evolved to feel resentment. That's maladaptive.
Yes.
And I have decided to reprogram the limbic system, which tends toward resentment, and I'm going to reprogram it toward. It's the same basic pattern. This is self-management. This is the essence of self-leadership. Doing what feels good. If it feels good, do it. If it feels bad, avoid it. Is being managed by your ancestors.
Yeah, well, the problem with that attitude is, well, in relationship to who and over what time span, right? And that's a huge problem. If you have a dominant lobster, I did a lot of investigation into crustacean,
crustaceans
neurology, because it's well mapped out. Right. If a dominant lobster who ages is defeated in a battle, his brain dissolves and reconstitutes as a subordinate brain. Right. Exactly the same thing happens to us.
Because the neuromodulator activity in the limbic system of the lobster brain. Because, once again, because the psychology is biology.
Yep.
The lobster can't do anything about that. The big dominant alpha lobster, if there is such a thing, is going to fight to try to maintain that position.
Yes. And if it fails... The lobster brain is so simple that it can't be subordinate sometimes and dominant sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's either victor or not. And when it loses, the victor brain is no good. So it has to go. And so it dissolves.
We can make decisions, and that's the divine in us. That's the difference. And
yes,
this is the essence of being fully human and fully alive. St. Irenaeus said, the glory of God is a man fully alive. What does it mean to be a man fully alive? It is managing your limbic system. It is not deciding that your level of affect that you have today is going to actually be the determining factor in how you treat other people. It is getting beyond who you were as a person. It's deciding to worship even though you don't feel a single milligram of faith on a particular day.
When everything falls apart for Job, his wife says, and we presume she loves him and that she knows he's a good man. She says, there's nothing left for you but to curse God and die.
Right.
And she means it.
Yeah.
And his attitude is, no matter what's happening to me right now, no matter the depth of my suffering, I refuse to lose faith in my central goodness, and I refuse to lose faith in the essential goodness of being and becoming itself. And that is a decision. right? It's a decision.
Right.
Right, because it's weird, because the evidence, and this is what his wife tells him, it's like, the evidence is that you're done. You've tried really hard, you were a good person, everyone knows it, even God, and yet everything's been stripped away from you, and you're in the most miserable imaginable position. You should curse God and die. That's what you would do if you were acting in accordance with the facts.
If you're purely limbic, there are lots and lots of people who make an absolutely a logical decision to commit suicide. If they're purely limbic. However, the divine in us, the divine console that allows us to manage our ancestral, our less evolved selves,
default self.
It's the bumper of tissue behind your forehead called the prefrontal cortex, which is what a miracle. My dog Chucho can't do that. He can't time travel. He can't manage his emotions. The essence of being fully alive is doing exactly that. This is the message that we can give to all these young people today who are so desperate. They don't have to live like Jordan Peterson and Arthur Brooks. They don't have to go, suffer through a PhD. They don't have to become behavioral scientists. They have to learn to manage themselves. They have to put their prefrontal cortex in charge of their limbic systems. That's and that takes practice, and that takes commitment, and that takes good relationships that will actually bring that along. It's interesting because the best indicator of somebody being able to manage in a man, his limbic system, is a good partner. Job's wife is the one who says, curse God and die, right? Interestingly, chapter 38 of Job is where he puts God in the dock. And he says, all right, everybody told me to, curse you and die and all this bad stuff. So what gives? I'm a righteous man, what gives? And then God actually turns it around and says, what do you know? You're so smart. Where were you when I created the stars in the sky?
The whole story is not evident to you. And
exactly.
Job accepts that. He says, look, I can take solace in my ignorance.
Exactly right.
Yeah, which is very useful. To take solace, because your ignorance is infinite. There's a lot of place for solace in that.
Self-management is the essence of, humility requires self-management too. We're not evolved to be humble.
Yes.
We are evolved as tribal societies to be humbled, but not to be humble. To be voluntarily humble is a decision that can actually lead us to live our best lives.
Right, that's wisdom.
And that's the 30th chapter of Job. That's the capstone of that thing. That's the big point at the end of the day, where he is victorious but still doesn't understand, puts God in the dock, and then is taught humility and accepts that humility and then thrives.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back at happiness. So because what you could say that the folk understanding of happiness is something like the gratification of a toddler's whim.
Right.
A toddler's having a tantrum in a store, and his mother, defeated, gives him the chocolate bar. And so now the child stops squawking and bitching and being subsumed by negative emotions and maybe smiles. And so you think, well, that's happiness.
Right.
Okay, but that's not the kind of happiness that you're describing.
That's gratification.
Okay.
Just gratification. And that's a feeling.
Okay, so look, if you're hedonistically oriented, why not be skeptical about your proposition that it's something other than immediate hedonistic gratification that constitutes happiness?
And certainly Epicurus would have been, and so the whole Epicurean tradition of trying to maintain positive feelings as much as possible.
Yes.
And again, he wasn't a hedonist in the modern sense. He was actually a highly moral character. But the whole point is to have peace in your life and surround yourself with people who like you and to have non-disagreeable conversations and to set your life up that has as little conflict as possible, which is catastrophically wrong. Because unless you have sanctified suffering in your life, you will not become strong, you will not learn, you will not grow, and you'll make no progress on your life.
Well, you also won't be able to withstand suffering when it comes.
Which is inevitable.
It will.
It's like my students ask me, so professor, are you saying I need to go look for suffering? I say, don't worry.
No,
We'll find you.
Yeah, right. You don't need to look for it.